From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Lots to cover tonight. George Green majored in geophysics at Colorado School of Mines and Law and Business at the University of Illinois. He's an expert in UFO phenomena, investigation, and making contact. He has had contact, he says, with ETs, and shares their message in a book that they authored called The Handbook for the New Paradigm. Mr. Green has information on how this planet began, how the so-called elite have plans for World War III, the reduction of the population, and the Plan 2000, which he says is in motion as part of the political agenda today. He is my guest tonight on Coast to Coast AM, George Green. Hello, George. How are you?
I'm fine, sir.
Sure, my pleasure. What's new with you?
Just, what do you mean what's new? I'm constantly busy.
It never stops, does it?
No,
well, George, tell me a little bit about your life, if you can, and how you got involved in some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight.
The first thing that happened to me, I was in the Air Force, and I was stationed at Edwards Air Force Base, and one morning I did the post-flight inspection on the X-15, the forerunner of the space shuttle.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, it lands out at in the dry bed on the north end of the runway, or about 2 miles away from where the hangars are. Anyway, I went out and did the post-flight inspection. I finished doing it, and on the north end of the runway was a couple of hangars I hadn't been to. I was cleared for top secret, and I'd been working all the secret things that we had at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I goes inside one of the hangars, and I'm looking at this round disc object about 20 feet across, and it was silver in color. It was unusual, but I'd been working on a lot of real strange-looking equipment. Anyway, I'm 10 feet away from it, so I'm, pretty close to it.
Only one in there at the time?
Just one. It was a small hangar. The hangar itself was like 50 feet across.
Okay.
Anyway, when I looked at it, I came back and I asked my commander if I could work on it, and he says, you saw that? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, that's an ion-powered craft designed by Sikorsky for use in outer space. And I said, well, great. When can I work on it? He says, it's still a civilian project, and you can't. And I said, okay. I didn't say anything more about it.
Yeah.
I went back to my room, and I mentioned it to my buddy, who happened to be the base photographer, who was giving me pictures of all the other stuff that we had, the top-secret things. And he said, what'd they tell you? And I told him. He said, that's not true. And he proceeded to show me pictures of the spacecraft along with the two dead aliens, which got my attention, George.
Oh, I think that would. Absolutely. Well, first of all, the picture of the two dead aliens, I've always been in wonder, George, over what they might have looked like. We've seen some films, whether they're real or not, I do not know. But the pictures that you saw, what did they look like? Well,
they look similar to the ones that were in Roswell. I've looked at a lot of them that sit around here. These did not have the distended stomachs, how they raised up and everything. These didn't have it.
Kind of like that bloated look?
Yeah, well, that was the ones that were from Roswell. These were not. These were just flat. But they were similar in looking. Anyway, my curiosity was up. Number one, why did my CO lie to me? So I went down and asked him. The first thing he reminded me was my top secret clearance is jail time and a fine. And actually, he and I joked about that a little bit, except for that jail time I didn't like.
Yeah, especially the way he probably pointed it out to you.
Well, it was $10,000 was the fine at that time. Which to me, my family was fairly wealthy. I could care less about that, but that jail time I didn't like. Anyway, what he said was, when the government is ready to tell the truth about UFOs and ETs, they will. Until then, you'll stick to your story. And he said, by the way, next weekend is Armed Forces Day, which is about the same time of year it is right now. He's on it, putting you on duty. If any civilian would happen to see it, I'm supposed to give him that ion-powered craft malarkey. So anyway, nothing happened, and it was top secret. I went on about my business, frankly, George. Didn't do anything else. Got out in the world of monopoly. Got into banking, real estate development. My last real estate project was $100 million, to give you an idea.
Oh, my.
I built shopping centers, office buildings, motels, and restaurants in 22 states.
Not chump change at all.
No, I even owned a city block in Beverly Hills, to give you an idea. Anyway, I built a house in Aspen, and my housekeeper had this book. This is in 1984. Called UFO Contact from the Pleiadians. Incredible color photographs of exactly the same thing I had seen earlier when I was in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I was saying here, why doesn't the government come forth with the truth about this stuff? So I'm looking at these pictures. My curiosity got me up. I just grabbed my plane. I flew down to Phoenix, and I talked to this couple who said that they were investigating a man in Switzerland who claimed to be in contact with beings from the star system, the Pleiades, that said that the Pleiadians engineered planet Earth for 500 million people. And they gave me a bunch of other information, and I said, look, I don't know about that story. And look, I'm in banking and real estate. I don't care about that particularly. But those pictures are real. And I said, what can I do to help you guys? And they said, well, we need some money. And I entered into agreement where I loaned them the money to publish the book.
How much?
$50,000 about.
$50,000 to people you didn't even know?
Well, yeah, I did. But I made them the deal that when they sold the books, that I got my money back. And I said, look, I'm going back and doing what I need to do. About 90 days later, George, they sent me the accounting on the books, and there was no check. And I called him on the phone, and I says, what do you mean? Where's my money?
Yeah, you're a businessman, right? You want your cash.
Said, well, wait a minute. He says, we found out who you are. You don't need it. And I was a little upset about that. And I says, forget that malarkey. And I flew right back down, filed suit against them.
Now, did you have some signed papers and stuff
sure.
from that?
Yeah, I had a signed
So you did it right.
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't have any problem with that, except for, first of all, when you sue people, and if they don't have any money, you waste a lot of time.
Right. You got to try
I was really curious because there was so much information that had been sharing with me during that period of time. But I said, the world should know a little bit more about this thing. So my wife and I grabbed a plane and hopped off to Switzerland myself, unannounced. We get to Zurich, Switzerland, rent a car, and we went about 45 miles out of town and went to a little town called Hinterschmidt-Rudi, where we knocked on the house of this man. And a girl came to the door. Her name was Bruni. And I said, look, I'm George Green, and I put the money up for the publishing of the books in the United States and also money into the movie that's being made about this case. And the lady said, we never heard about you. And I said, well, I don't understand that.
The silent investor, right?
That's right. She says, well, we're not talking to Americans. They're all crooks. And I said, well, I can understand a little bit about that. And I said, but I think that the information that you have, I says, you go back. The gentleman's name was Billy Myers.
Oh, yeah, we've heard a lot about him.
Well, I'll just tell you the rest of the story because it's more fascinating. Anyway, I tell her to go back and talk to Billy and say, look, you tell him I think the information that he's given me so far is pretty astounding, and I want to get some verification myself. And I said, the buck stops here. I think it's important if it's real. I said, I don't have a problem. At any rate, she comes back about 10 minutes later, and she says, Mr. Green, I'm sorry. She says, Shirley MacLaine was here about 2 months ago, and she promised to help us, and they didn't do anything. And all we get is, all the lies from Americans, so we're not going to do anything. I says, c'est la vie. I says, I guess it was late in the afternoon. I said, where's the closest hotel? I says, I'm going to take off to Austria tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So she gave me the instruction, the directions. And I went over to the hotel, and we checked in. The next morning, about 7 in the morning, she's knocking on the door. And she said, Mr. Green, we found out who you are. And she proceeded to hand me this 2 pages of information, George, about me personally that nobody could know. I mean, it was just incredible. So we were invited back to, I would just call it the compound. I mean, Billy just has a place.
And he normally doesn't meet people at all.
No, not normally.
No.
But anyway, we were invited back into his situation, and we spent the next week, and frankly, everything I thought I knew turned out to be a lie. Because at that point, I got to see a lot of things that Billy showed me. I took pictures myself. I even went down to a neighbor who, unannounced, and asked him if he had seen anything. And he proceeded to take me around the back of his house, and in the mud was some huge footprints. He says there's a guy 7 meters tall leaning against the barn this morning.
7 meters tall? That's almost...
George, all I can tell you is I saw the footprints, and this farmer was milking a cow. So what do I